Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. In this video we're going to be doing the top 10 command point errors that you could be making when playing Warhammer 40k. So I'm going to show you these 10 errors that you could be making and hopefully prevent you from making them in your future games, so therefore your win rates will increase and improve. So before we get into this video, make sure you are subscribing if you haven't already, and make sure you are liking the video at the start of all these videos, just to help push the algorithm. And if you're not a member already, have a look and join if you want, and it really does help the channel progress and make better future content. Yeah, you know what I mean. Let's get into it. So the first error I've got for today is not saving up command points for defensive stratagems. Now what do I mean by defensive stratagems? I'm going to give you a whole host of them and slap them on the screen now. You've got reactive moves such as the reactive subroutines from the Canoptic Court. You've got the nano assembly protocols, which is the -1 to damage in the obeisance phalanx. The protocol of Eternal Revenant from the Awakened Dynasty to be bringing back a character. A -1 to hit in the Annihilation Legions with Masks of Death. Quantum Deflection for the 4+ invulnerable save in a Hypercrypt Legion, particularly useful for your monolith. Or you could use Unyielding Forms, which is a -1 to wound if the strength is greater than our toughness, which is in the Star Shatter arsenal. And then you can even go further than that into the core rules, such as Counter-Offensive, which is the interrupt in the fight phase stratagem. Now of course that's just Necrons. All different factions have all their own stratagems and things that they could do defensively. I mean, Space Marines have got Armor of Contempt. That's a well-known stratagem for a lot of, well, all the Space Marine factions really. But there's a whole host of defensive stratagems that you need to be saving up for. If you don't save up for them, then you simply are not going to be able to use them. I know that sounds really obvious, but you can really mess up your opponent's game plans. Maybe they've mapped out, how much I need to hit on average, how much I need to wound on average, how much I can get through the armor save on average, but then you go slapping on a -1 to wound. Then all of a sudden, they've maneuvered units into a certain location with mathematical hopes that they're going to delete a certain unit or do a certain amount of damage to a unit, and you've completely changed the plans because you're now not going to die potentially with that said unit, or maybe you've done a reaction move and now all of a sudden they can't get within range for their shooting attacks or a charge, and you completely screwed up their plans. So that's why you should always save CP for defensive stratagems. They're probably the best stratagems in the game in my opinion. Number 2, not realizing that holding command points actually gives you an ace up the sleeve, or up your sleeve. Now, this isn't necessarily an error, but at the same time it is an error, because if you don't realize this, then your opponent will take full advantage of it. Holding CP means your opponent knows you've got these defensive stratagems. Your opponent knows you could potentially interrupt in the fight phase, or you can do a reactionary move, or you can teleport back to the monolith of the Eternity Gate stratagem in the Hypercrypt Legion. Your opponent will potentially know those things, especially in tournament games when you're coming up against a more savvy player. But when you don't have any CP because you've rinsed them on, really silly things, then your opponent has all the knowledge. They've got all the information they need. They know you cannot do a damn thing about what they want to do. Again, mathematically they may have worked out all the averages in order to deal with a unit or get onto an objective or make a charge move and so on. And if they know you haven't got the CP to prevent any of those things happening, then they're going to be more aggressive and they're going to go do what they want to do and literally, bend you over a barrel. Whereas keeping CP in your back pocket, it keeps your opponent on edge. They know you may be doing a reaction move right now, or you may be doing the interrupt stratagem right now. So you kind of put them a little bit on the back foot. They're not as aggressive, they're not as confident, and therefore they're going to think twice about doing certain things with their army. You literally have given yourself the tools to make their maths incorrect, and therefore they can't achieve their short-term goals within that battle round or the game itself. So having CP in the bank, just sitting there, is sort of a defense within itself and a deterrence. That's probably the word I'm looking for, a deterrence. Number 3, using CP reroll stratagems at a bad time. A lot of the time, using command reroll actually isn't worth it it might feel like it's worth it at the time, but a lot of the time you might just be pissed off. You know, you failed an armor save and it's a real easy save, or it was a really crappy weapon that's done it, and you're just like, damn it, I've just rolled a 1 and I'm just about to, you know, I've just lost some wounds. And then you go, I'm going to CP reroll it. It's sort of an impulse, slight anger coming out of you, like, I need to reroll. I'm not accepting that. And that's where you lose games, because you're throwing away command points. 1 CP for one single dice roll is not worth it when you compare what you can be doing with that 1 CP. You know, you can literally change your entire unit's hit rolls with just 1 CP, but instead you're using it on one roll that potentially could still miss. I mean, there are a few occasions where you would use a CP reroll. Maybe it's to save a unit from death, a really key unit or a key vehicle. Maybe the Silent King, you know, it's on its last leg. He's on his last legs, and you saved a few of them, but then one went through, and that one is enough to kill the Silent King. And you go, I'm going to CP reroll this. It's a 4+, and it may massively change the game. In those situations, I think it's fair to use a CP reroll if you want to go for it. Also, potentially a failed charge roll, a really important charge roll. Maybe it's a Scorpet Destroyers. They've done rapid ingress and you've just messed up. You rolled a double 1 and you've just messed up your charge roll completely and left them out in the open potentially. Then they're the situations where I go, you know what, the dice gods have messed me up today, but I'll use a CP to get out of it. But when you're using stratagem CP rerolls just for, missed a hit, let's do another hit, and you still might miss, and you're only getting 1 hit, or you're only making 1 save. It's just 1 single dice roll, and most of the time it doesn't actually benefit you as much as it could do with other stratagems. I mean, there are other stratagems. I'm going to go back into this a bit more. Look at the Protocol of Conquering Tyrant from the Awakened Dynasty. That gives you full rerolls to hit. You'll probably have a leader within the unit, so it's full rerolls to hit, not just the ones. And that will be on all the hit rolls. So if you've got a unit of Immortals and you've got 20 shots, all of a sudden you're re-rolling all of them, and the Plasmanta's in there, so 5+ critical, so you may as well fish, you know what I mean? That's just 1 CP, but you're spending 1 CP because you've missed one of your Locust Heavy Destroyer shots or something like that. You've got to kind of calculate it, you know, take a step back and think, is this actually worth it? Most of the time it isn't. It isn't. Next, number 4, I've got not using the power of gaining CP in a game. Now we've got a couple of ways, and then we've got something else which we can talk about as well. The first way is Imotech the Stormlord. For 100 points, Imotech the Stormlord is absolute gold dust, because he gives you an extra CP in your turn. So you're gaining 2 in your turn, 1 in your opponent's turn, and that's 3 CP per battle round. That will start to stack up quite nicely. You've also got Necron Overlords. Whichever variant you're taking, they've got the My Will Be Done ability, so one of them in a battle round can reduce the cost of a stratagem by 1. Now that's not quite the same as gaining CP, but in some ways it is, because if you're planning on spending, you know, maybe it's the Protocol of Hungry Void, and you've got some Lich Guard and an Overlord, and you wanted to pump up their strength and AP, you can do it for free, so you haven't actually spent anything. But there is a third way which doesn't really relate to Necrons at all. It's just an army, well, it's a game-wide thing from the core rules, which is discarding a secondary, well, it's actually not from the core rules, is it? It's from the mission decks. It's from this set of rules. But yeah, discarding a secondary card or multiple secondary cards at the end of your turn. Not at the start, because that's completely different. You've got to spend CP to do that. But if it gets to the end of your turn and you want to discard a card or 2, you can do so, and you'll actually gain a command point. So there are 3 or 2.5 ways, if you like, to gain CP, and it's very powerful, which is why Imotech is 100 points and why Overlords are 85, I guess. So yeah, always think about that, because that could really change a lot of things with the way you're using stratagems when you've got a lot more CP in the bank. Number 5, doing Overwatch when you shouldn't. Now I'm laughing at this one inside because I'm an absolute Overwatch merchant. I love an Overwatch. I think it's because I get lucky with my Overwatches, and the people that I play tend to just get so angry and upset when I do something in Overwatch, and it makes me quite cheerful inside. But realistically, you shouldn't do Overwatch. You really shouldn't. As a Necrons player, I'm saying that. I mean, most of the time, Overwatch isn't going to even make a dent. It really isn't. I mean, you need 6s first of all, unless you're using the Canoptic Doomstalker where you need 5s. But even the Doomstalkers don't really have enough shots. It's D6 plus 1 with Blast. Potentially against the big units it could be okay. But it's not enough shots to warrant spending a command point. We've got a few torrents in our codex, such as the Trike Stalker's Heat Ray, but that's just 2d6, so on average you're getting 7 hits, which are automatically hitting. You still need to roll to wound. You still need to get past the saving throws. And then once all that's happened, you realise you've not actually done that much for 1 CP. I mean, 3 Locust Destroyers with the Exterminator weapons, they're probably the best we've got to offer in terms of Overwatch, because you've got 36 shots at rapid fire range, which means on average 6 of them will be 6s. That's just an average. And their sustain hits 1, so that would make 12 hits. 12 hits and you're re-rolling 1s to wound against the right targets. That could have a little bit of play there, but for the majority of the time it's not worth it unless you're just playing a fun themed kind of game. Otherwise, try to stay clear of Overwatch and keep them for your defensive strats. Number 6, overbuffing a unit with stratagems. Now stratagems are great. They're great. We can always do so much stuff with stratagems, depending on the detachment of course, but sometimes we can overdo it and overplay a stratagem where we don't really need to do it and need to spend the CP to do so. Maybe you've charged in with some Scorpic Destroyers with the Scorpic Lord, and you want to turn on again the Protocol of Hungry Void for 1 CP. Now in many situations 6 Destroyers and a Scorpic Lord are going to absolutely slap. I mean, you're doing mortal wounds on the charge, you've got a solid amount of attacks, you're re-rolling hit rolls, lethal hits, devastating wounds, and then the Lord himself is going to slap as well because he's got some decent weaponry. You probably didn't need the Protocol of Hungry Void, but a lot of people will play the card, play the stratagem, and say, yep, you know what, I'm going to guarantee that unit's going to die, when they didn't necessarily need to. So it's kind of all about knowing what your units can do against certain units. That all comes from experience, of course, but you can math it out at home when you're making your lists. There's lots of websites, there's lots of apps on the phones, on your iPads or whatever. There are apps to do the maths for you, and you can kind of work things out and then obviously give it a try against yourself. Just try, roll some dice, test things out. But a lot of the time, in this example, you just don't need the strength, you don't need the AP push, you're just going to do it. They're just going to do it themselves. So get familiar with what they're capable of before making that rash decision of spending CP. Number 7, forgetting to add CP in both turns. I've done this many times and I bet you guys have too. Own up to it, you know you've done it, right? How many times have you gone a few turns and gone, did I add my CP? I don't think I added my CP in your turn. And then sometimes you can kind of work it out, and I've spent it on this, I've spent it on this, and in a friendly game you can kind of work it out. But if you're playing competitive tournament play, your opponent's going to say, no, you ain't getting extra CP for that. We ain't got time to be working out what you haven't done. If you've missed it, you've missed it. You might have a friendly opponent that might let you have it. It all depends on who you come up against. But they don't need to give you it, is what I'm saying. But it does happen, so make sure you are putting your CP up in your turn and on your opponent's turn. Maybe, well, what I like to do is have a dice. At the top of my dice tray, if you've seen my back reports, I've got a single separate dice for me and then another dice for my opponent, and we both flip them together so we both can remind each other. But it does happen, everyone's done it, but let's try to not do it in future. Where are we? We're on number 8 now. Number 8, not budgeting for planned stratagems. So this one, we kind of already spoke about having CP in your pocket for defensive stratagems, or just having CP in the pocket for a deterrence. But this is slightly different, because this relates to CP that you plan on spending on your stratagems. So you've actually planned these stratagems out with the units that you put in your list. It's all prepared in your head. This stratagem's going to happen with this unit at this particular time potentially. which you know could end up winning you the game. Now we gain 1 CP per player turn, as we've just mentioned. Unless you've got Imitate, then you're going to get an extra one. Now let me give you a scenario actually, let's just hold that thought. Let me give you a scenario, right? You're playing the Hypercrypt Legion, and you've got that monolith on the table. The big monolith, Hypercrypt Legion, it's the big centerpiece of your army, right? You've got, in all your tactics are focused around your monolith, and you want to go for the quantum deflection stratagem, which is the 4+ invulnerable save to a vehicle. So it doesn't have one, it doesn't have an in-run save, so you can give it this in-run save in your opponent's shooting phase, in your opponent's fight phase, and so on. Now obviously it depends on your opponent's faction, but let's imagine you're coming up against a shooty faction. You're coming up against, I don't know, Astra Militarum, Tau, whatever. They're very shooty, they're not really melee based. So you know in your opponent's shooting phase, you definitely need 1 CP to turn on quantum deflection for your monolith, for that 4+ invulnerable save, right? It's part of your big game plan. If you lose your monolith, the plan just goes to ruins. So you need to budget that 1 CP for that shooting phase, your opponent's shooting phase. So if you go overspending CP on, you know, silly overwatches or command rerolls because you lost a Locust Heavy Destroyer or something, you might realise, crap, I've overspent, I've got nothing left for my monolith. And your opponent is going to see that as well. They're going to go, aha, you've been spending CP on this quantum deflection stratagem, it's been a pain in my ass, you now cannot turn it on, I'm going to shoot everything I've got at the monolith. So you've left yourself wide open there, and that was your planned stratagem. From the moment you made the list, that was your plan. So make sure you are budgeting for the stratagems that are within your plan. Also, some stratagems aren't 1 CP, they're 2 CP, they're a little bit more expensive. So maybe you're relying on the Unyielding Forms stratagem, which is a stratagem in the Star Shatter arsenal. It's a -1 to wound if your opponent's strength is greater than our toughness. So maybe you're really relying on that stratagem to get you through, get your vehicles through or your mounted units through onto objectives and whatnot. So this could be a big part of your game. But if you're spending on unneeded stratagems and then you get to the point in the game where you kind of burnt them all and you're like, well, damn, I don't have the -1 to wound stratagem anymore, it's gone. So I've had instances where my command phase comes, I get a CP, and I've got 1 CP, it's like, yes, I've got a CP, this is what I need. And then I get my cards, and there's an awful card, I'm like, oh, Sabotage, you guys know I hate Sabotage. Oh, I'm going to burn that one, I'll burn it for 1 CP, discard it, new orders, and then get a new card. There you go. Oh, I've got, you know, Secure No Man's Land, I can do that, happy days. Oh crap, I've spent my CP, I don't have anything now. So it happens a lot, you've just got to make sure you are budgeting for those stratagems. On to number 9. This one I'm not sure if it's a command point error, but I think it warrants a place in this video. It's doing the Hexmarks Overwatch correctly. Now, when you're using the Hexmarks ability, or the Hexmark Destroyer's ability, which is Inescapable Death, you get to do Overwatch on a 2+, even if you've already used Overwatch in that phase. Now, I've said that very quickly on purpose because that's probably what a lot of people just do. They go, ah, yeah, I can use it twice. I can use Overwatch twice in my turn. And they don't really look at the small print here. You need to use the Hexmarks ability last, because it says even if you've already used Fire Overwatch, you can use it again. If you do that in reverse, and you use the Hexmark Destroyer first, and then you use it for free, you know, the Overwatch for free, and then you come to another unit and you really wanted to Overwatch with them, you can't do it. You can't do Fire Overwatch twice in a turn, let alone a phase. So you've got to look at the small print of the ability. If you've already used it this phase, you can reuse it for free as well. It's completely for free. But the second part to that is phase, because you can do Overwatch in the movement phase and you can do Overwatch in the charge phase. So if you did some Overwatch in the movement phase, your opponent's movement phase, maybe it was the Locust Heavy Destroyers with the Exterminator weapons, you fired Overwatch, done really well with it, you're happy with yourself, and then it gets to your opponent's charge phase, and someone's coming close to the Hexmark Destroyer and you go, aha, I've got an ability where I can do free Overwatch. No, you can't, because it's not the same phase anymore, and the ability specifically says you can reuse Fire Overwatch which is a bit of a loophole in itself, but you can reuse that fire Overwatch stratagem for 0 CP, even if you've already used it this phase. But yeah, a lot of people are still getting that wrong. So we come on to my number 10, the 10th command point error that you could be making, which is not avoiding Battleshock on key units. Now this is a two-parter, so bear with me, okay? Firstly, you need to, well, you don't need to, you would like to have CP in the bank for potentially using the Insane Bravery stratagem from the core rulebook, which allows you to auto-pass the Battleshock test. You can do that before you roll, by the way. Make sure you don't roll first, otherwise you can't use it. This is a once per game stratagem, and it could be on a key location, a key objective, and maybe there's -1 to your Battleshock test and all sorts of jazz. Maybe you're below half strength and you've got to take a Battleshock, and if you fail that Battleshock, you could potentially be losing a lot of victory points. This could be huge for not just your primaries, in fact, it could be your secondaries too. Maybe you can't now do an action like cleanse or something. But the second part to this 10th point is if you are Battleshocked, then you simply cannot use stratagems on the unit at all, full stop, until your next turn. Or until you're not Battleshocked, I guess. And that could be a really important unit that you were budgeting some CP to use stratagems on. If they're Battleshocked, you actually can't anymore. So it could be like the Silent King and the Obeisance Phalanx, right? -1 to damage stratagem, which is the Nano Assembly Protocols. -1 to damage, which is a common stratagem for the Silent King. Maybe that's something you planned on. But let's take, for example, you've lost the 2 Trichomoneers on the side of the Silent King. Now you should be taking Battleshock because you've lost more than half of the unit. You've got a decision to make. Do you either, you could go for the 6+ Battleshock test, which is in your favour, but maybe there's like -1 to wound, not -1 to -1 to the Battleshock tests, and maybe you're not ignoring modifiers and things like that. So maybe it's a harder test, it could be on a 7+. There's negative modifiers all over the game, right? So if you were to, take the chance and roll that, you could fail it. All that OC down the drain for that turn, 0 OC, and now you can't use stratagems, you can't use the Nano Assembly Protocols anymore. So you've got to make a decision. Do I just auto-pass the Battleshock but I won't be able to use the stratagem after? Or maybe you still will with more CP, maybe you've got more in the bank. But you've got to kind of work this out. You need to avoid Battleshock on key units. Maybe you spend something on Insane Bravery in that turn, just to get through that turn, and then you can still use Nano Assembly Protocols with the Silent King, for example, because you're going to otherwise risk and gamble failing Battleshock, and therefore you lose everything. You lose absolutely everything. So guys, that is 10 command point errors that you may be making. Are you making any of those? Let me know if you were, and if there's any others you want to add, put them down below. Also, make sure you are liking and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.